was a campus-like setting, the boys' unit on the west side, the girls on the east. In the middle was the office building where you went to talk to a therapist.
What chapter is this?
Chapter 9. Does Youthville still exist?
Well, that wasn't the one burned down though.
No, it was after this. My first experience with therapy today, I see a therapist only when I need to work out something going on in the present. However, I still struggle with depression in the fall, but no longer need medications other than an antidepressant on occasion. Seems the worst times seems the worst time my life, late fall and around Christmas. Add to that, I also live in the north where a lot of people have seasonal affective disorder.
Mm-hmm.
When I arrived at the Youthville, or what I called the home, I was introduced to my roommate. The rooms were nice enough, and it was a new facility with large dining room. We attended public school, so it didn't feel like you were locked up, even though we were. There were house parents that stayed there 24/7. We were assigned a unit, and each unit had a house parent. There were a number of activities scheduled which were meant to keep us out of trouble. However, the girls, including myself, found our own kind of activities. For instance, we would sneak out through the screen windows and make our way downtown to meet up with boys. I remember a girl named Sally and the IHOP to Santa Fe train. Hid out in the ladies' room and made it all the way to Kansas City, Missouri. It was the coolest train. It even had the old chandeliers that swayed to the rumbling of the train cars. We conjured up a story that we were married and going to meet our husbands. That's what we told the women in the ladies' room. At the time, the fact that we were only 14 years old didn't dissuade us from trying to pass as married women. The conductor never checked the room. When we got off the train station, Sally called her grandmother and she picked us up. We were already in trouble. My parents were on their way to pick us up after Sally's grandmother called them. That was yet another long car ride. Silently, Dad drove along through the night while Mom kept glancing back and giving me the evil eye. I knew when she was furious and held back because she didn't want to unleash her anger in front of a girl she didn't know. What must have possessed you was about all she said. That was my first experience with running away and first of many adventures to come. Needless to say, Sally and I were both grounded when we returned to the home. In private, Mom and Dad really scolded me. By then they decided I was having a heyday there and ought to just come home with them. Can you imagine what that would have been like?
Bless you. Yeah, they're probably like, oh, she's just having fun.
Yeah, all the way. The counselor handling my case advised against it. She felt I was having too many emotional problems to go home. My therapist said I didn't like myself. My parents couldn't understand why. After all, they had given me everything I wanted, provided me with everything I needed, and loved me with all their hearts. The list continued of reasons I would be better off if I were home with them. It never occurred to them why I was acting out in the first place. Jeez. The next morning, my caseworker came to get me. Oddly, I didn't want to leave the jail. I suppose I wanted him to beg me to come with him. Mr. Unger, the caseworker, came into my cell and talked with me for a while, and then we went back to the home. In the big building, we sat down and talked about what was going on with me. I didn't seem to know the right answers to anything he asked. He seemed to focus on why I didn't like myself. Not once did he ask about why I wasn't living with my parents. I shared that I loved my parents and didn't want them to be upset with me, but secretly I was afraid of going home because of the arguments that Mom and I would get into. They had to have known I was a very angry young girl, and I was at a very difficult age of wanting to be a woman. Sometimes I felt like this was why my parents kept me there in the home, so that I could work through those issues there rather than at home. After the jail experience, I continued to myself cut away, ride home from school with boys, hook up with older men from town. Basically, I shattered any self-esteem and respect for myself that I may have had. It didn't matter what happened to me back then, I just didn't care what happened. I had so much anger towards others and myself. Twice I was sent to a private mental clinic, but to no avail. Even then, no one mentioned my background. No one called it abuse in those days either. I never heard the words or the subject matter until I was long into my marriage and motherhood.
Wow.
So this here, she had some extra statements when he gets to chapter 11, hospital days, down dark halls. That was during the day of Christmas Eve, 1963. It was taken down many corridors until reaching the youth section of the institution. All the girls were teenagers, but no older than 15. Once you turned 16, you were moved to the adult section. It was so dismal. All the workers wore white, and things were run like the military. Once inside, it was one locked door after another. They eventually unlocked a door towards where the girls were kept. Warehoused is most like it. By then I ran away. 1967, at the age of 18. It appeared that no one ever left. As an adult, I strongly believe people who were more like me were kept there longer than needed to collect the big insurance bucks for the state. Old people stayed forever too, tied to their chairs on a daily basis, waiting for their days of confinement, many of whom may have suffered from Alzheimer's as opposed to, or along with, having Alzheimer's. The place burned down a few years ago, but I will never forget my stay there. A lot of the buildings were attached with long enclosed winding halls leading from one building to another. There was a common dining room per building where all residents, regardless of age or gender, dined.
Like one dining room?
One dining room, but halls from all over led to the dining room. They discouraged talking. We were there to shut up and eat. People sneaked and traded their food among each other. Many aides stood watching over the room. They were always laughing and joking.
They were always laughing and joking. We left off with they were always laughing and joking.
Yeah.
In the middle.
Once inside, it was one locked door after another.
I think it was down a little bit. You fell asleep for like just 2 seconds, if that.
Should
Yeah.
this be moved down a couple of paragraphs, which was a lot of the buildings were attached with winding halls, blah blah blah. So you skip that. After being herded through a group of rowdy teenagers on the youth ward, I was led down yet another hall to a shower room. There I was told to strip down naked and handed a bottle of black disinfectant to wash myself. No privacy whatsoever. Two aides stood by and watched over my ever move. I felt degraded, ashamed, and ugly. I have never shown in front of strangers before, not even in school. The closest feeling I had ever had
Closest feeling I ever had is towards the bottom.
no privacy whatsoever. Two aides stood by and watched over my every move. I felt degraded, ashamed, and ugly. I had never showed in front of strangers before, not even in school. Closest feeling I had ever had. The closest feeling I had ever had to this was when I was on the farm and Dad came in and washed my back and insisted on washing my chest. I resisted, but he snickered and always got his way. Mom never saw any harm in that.
What?
Those same awkward feelings returned as I stood there butt naked to the whole world. There was no hiding, no covering up myself. The perfect bouffant hairdo melted down to a stringy mess under hot water, making me feel like the Wicked Witch of the West. A towel was tossed to me and I was told to follow the nurse. Down the hall we went further and further from society into dark areas of voices calling out from behind closed doors. We stopped in front of an empty room. The steel door was open with the tiny window at the top and a screen-covered little square opening at the bottom. The nurse stood there with a huge ring of keys and pointed into the room. This will be your room for 24 hours, doctor's orders.
What is this Hospital Days chapter?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Too much to read. All patients do this. Now give me your towel. What? Not my towel. Where are my clothes? I asked. They were nowhere in sight. The nurse just stood there, her arm outreached, waiting for me to give up my towel. The room was empty except for a mattress on the floor with a wool blanket. Later I learned that told my parents later I learned that probably they told my parents. This has all been redone. I would have a nice room of my own. Mom was pleased. She knew
Nice
how I
room.
liked to decorate the walls. Did Mom have any idea this was the room? Nothing could be kept in the room, let alone on the walls. And that one window, the mesh screen on the window was on the inside and the bars on the outside. That was my first experience living in the world of the mentally ill. I wasn't prepared to be drugged with Thorazine, but it was standard procedure for all that entered. By night it was snowing. Everything was turning white outside my prison window. Christmas Eve was here and I was trapped like a dog. It was so painful to think about what my family might be doing at home. Bobby and I always enjoyed wrapping the gifts and waited anxiously for morning.
Dad, do you need a drink of water?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
to see the surprise on her parents' face. This was one of the darkest moments so far. I felt sick to my stomach about the way I looked, and knowing the nurse could stare at my naked body through the window of the door without me knowing it. It could be hours before I would fall asleep. I felt forsaken by the family I thought loved me. I prayed through my tears until sleep replaced my exhausted, weary soul. At some point I woke in the night to find the lights were still on. I soon learned that the lights never go off in seclusion cells. The tears began to flow again as I thought about Mom, Dad, and Bob waking up without me. Why did they have me taken to such a horrid place? Was I so bad I had to be sent away? Didn't they have any say so about where I went? What kind of gifts would they open while I sat and rotted? My thoughts were continually so depressing, as were the looks of the cell, which was painted institutional green. For years to come, Christmas never felt the same. Advertisement for Christmas carols, holiday jingles, and family activities would occasionally set off an emotional reaction that I've come to know as post-traumatic stress disorder. I cried out to God to help me, to give me strength to get through till morning light. I told him I could see my parents on Christmas Day. My hopes lifted now and then as I thought about that time. Surely I could endure the treatment till then. Would I be able to tell them what really happened, and that my room was stripped down as I was? And I wanted to tell them I was made to take 3 kinds of pills. Never had I needed to take pills before that. That's what I hung on to and hoped to tell them. However, it was a lie, one of many I was told. So this says the paragraph needs to be cleaned up. Obviously, you're trying to wrap it up, that first night experience, but not sure if you're dreaming about what you would tell them or blah blah blah.
Oh, you weren't dreaming, were you?
No. Jeez.
How awful, just be yanked out of your everyday life and thrown into that.
It's the worst. It is absolutely the worst.
I mean, one day you're living at the house and having breakfast and
With my
going to
brother,
school,
and then my whole life has changed
yanked.
in such a short time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then this was called endurance. Early in the morning, a tray of food was brought to my door and left on the floor, where I had to slide it under the door and into my room. The aide quickly left after giving me more pills. Sitting on the floor by the little screen, I tried to peer out but couldn't see anything. After a period of time, I learned to listen through the screen with the holes. I could hear through the holes and could hear who was coming down the hall and gather useless data, which kept my mind occupied. The food was mush and the milk warm, but I was so disheartened. I ate every bit of it and waited to be let out. Time passed and I continued to sit and wait patiently without a clock. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew it was Christmas Day. It was Christmas morning. I looked out the bar-covered window to the snow-covered ground. As much as I wanted to be excited for Christmas, I wasn't. An aide came to the door and gave me a robe to wear to the day hall to open gifts my parents had left for me. They were nice presents, but useless, as I couldn't keep them in my room. They were stored away with my clothes. All too soon, it was back to my locked room. Giving them my robe, I stepped into what I called the cave. My parents were nowhere to be seen. In fact, I didn't get to visit them for 3 months, and then it was for 15 minutes. By that time, I was on so much Thorazine, my tongue curled up, and I couldn't talk. But curled backwards towards the roof of my mouth. It was so difficult to talk that way, and especially
Like when you have a paper clip in your mouth?
Yeah. I'm a
Thank
writer,
you.
that's what they do.
I know.
And they have a cigarette. When the book is finished, they have a whole cigarette and then put it out. And what's her name comes and tries to kill that guy. You know,
Oh,
in
you're
that
talking about
movie.
Misery?
Yeah. I remember him smoking a cigarette, and when he
Mm-hmm.
was done, he smoked the whole cigarette. I didn't feel I could tell him how miserable I was and how I'd been mistreated. To this day, I have no memory of opening gifts. Years later, Mom said they knew nothing about my treatment and didn't know they had a choice to take me out. They just went by what the social worker told them and didn't ask questions. The social worker kept telling them it was best I stay for a while longer. I felt so punished and wondered, what did I do to deserve this kind of humiliation enforced on me? I didn't see a doctor for weeks at a time, and then it was a waste of time. I knew they wouldn't understand me. The same old questions were being asked again. Why are you here? Do you like yourself? Are you angry? Do you? And then very private questions were asked, which were very humiliating. All right, my next question is personal. Do you ever play with yourself? Me? Not anymore. I smiled back. Several years ago, I had a nice dollhouse and lots of dolls to play with. I and my brother would play with my dolls, but my brother got too old for that sort of stuff. I didn't have many friends, so I had to entertain myself. I'm too old for dolls now. Doctor, do you hear voices or talk to yourself? Of course I don't. I'm not crazy. Do you have nightmares that are true to life? I told him when I was younger I dreamed Captain Kangaroo was drilling his way up through my floor of my bedroom to get to me and was very frightened. It was a bad dream I experienced several times. I see. Well then, do you fantasize? Do you dream in the daytime when you're awake about things you wish would come true? Well, sometimes I think about my real mother, wishing I could see her, ask her why she didn't love me enough to keep me. If she loved me, maybe I could start over with her. I don't think Mom and Dad really love me anymore, and I have caused them a lot of trouble, like right now, and I bet they wish they'd never adopted me. You know what I mean, Doctor? Oh, yes, that's very good, Nancy. Now let me ask you this. Are you an angry person? Do you hate anyone? And what would you say your problem is? Me? Well, first of all, I don't really have a problem. I'd be happy if you'd let me go back home now. I won't get into any more trouble because I know better. I've learned my lesson. I don't think I'm an angry person. I love my parents even though I've made them mad. Most of all, this is my fault, but I can change, and no, I don't hate anybody. I love everyone, and it's a beautiful day.
Right.
Again, not once did the subject of Dad doing what he did come up. After questioning, and ink blot tests were given, much like the ones taken at Menninger's. I also had to make up stories to accompany the pictures that were presented. I thought the tests were great fun as I let my imagination run free. Actually, I was disappointed when the session was over because my freedom was over too. Off to my room I went and continued to go for the next 7 months. 7 months straight I was kept in that dinky room with only a blanket to cover my nakedness. Daily I asked the same question, can I come out of my room now? It was important for me to behave myself because maybe I could leave sooner rather than later. I wondered what else I could do to behave more appropriately. However, several months later I came to a point where I just lost hope and didn't care anymore. Giving in to the rage of being confined, I began pounding both fists on the steel screen as hard as I could until they bled. Aides came and put cuffs on my ankles and wrists and tied the four together, then knocked me out with Thorazine. I slept for 24 hours after these episodes. I wondered where God was. I believed in God, so I talked to him and I prayed often to him to get me out of there. I gave up on getting to see or talk to my parents. They never knew about my restraining techniques when I was cuffed to the four corners of the steel frame after the injection knocked me out. That's how I woke up. Little did I realize how great the impact of such a disclosure would be, or that I would never see Becky again. I think we've been here.
Yeah.
Are you?
She must have put pages, or is that stuff from the editor?
No, I don't know that. Are you trying to get your dad in trouble? Why, of course not. Oh.
That's out of order, I think.
I think so. Troublemaker, blah, blah, blah.
I turn this fan off.
I don't know where that goes. Yeah, this, I could redo this latest I read. Wasn't that fun?
Oh, gosh. It's just terrible for you to be making.
Huh?
It's just terrible for you.